Ron was released on May 31st, 1985. It was directed, written, and edited by Akira Kurosawa and is an adaptation of William Shakespeare's famous play, King Lear. At the time of its release, it was the most expensive film ever produced in Japan for $11 million. The film is about a warlord who decides to relinquish his rule in favor to his three sons, to disastrous results. It is also a film about how the past comes back to haunt oneself. The main character, Hidetora Ichimonji, is played by Tetsuya Nakadai, and he gives a fantastic performance. I've never seen madness captured this impeccably on film ever before. This is a film with numerous themes, mainly related to guilty conscience and the destruction of family relationships. In addition, it also illustrates that despite good intentions, there's no reckoning for the wrongdoings of the past. And one thing that I really love about this film is that you don't know if Hidetora is the victim or the villain. We want to empathize with him because he's introduced to us as the protagonist. However, during the course of the film, as the movie progresses, we see that this is not a good person, that this person has committed great atrocities. And the interesting thing is that these atrocities are conveyed to us through expository dialogue. So there's no flashbacks. So it's almost as if the viewer is being pulled in two opposite directions. We empathize with Hidetora because we've never visually seen the atrocities that he has committed. However, we hear about them and we find it unimaginable because we see this man who's enduring such great suffering. But we see, or hear rather, through the expository dialogue that this person has done terrible things. And I find it highly appropriate that this film is called Ron, which translates into the word chaos. Because this feeling that the viewer feels, this sense of being pulled in two different directions, being torn between empathy and revulsion for this character, the main character, it is chaotic. Not only that, but the notion of guilty conscience and deteriorating family relationships is also chaotic as well. And there's that sense that despite good intentions, that there's no reckoning for the wrongdoings of the past. Basically, the past coming back to haunt oneself is a chaotic feeling as well. And it also illustrates that there's no escape from suffering. And this film truly feels like a descent into hell. And like I said, I've never seen madness and insanity conveyed in such an impeccable way as I've seen with Hidetora's madness, his slow descent into hell. It truly is an exceptional experience, and Ron truly is one of the greatest films that I've ever seen. So this film is basically King Lear, but set in 15th century feudal Japan. And the actor that plays Lord Hidetora, Tetsuya Nakadai, is amazing. And you can see him in the masterpiece that Akira Kurosawa made called Yojimbo, which was the inspiration for Clint Eastwood's Fistful of Dollars. And you can also see Nakadai in another awesome film called Sword of Doom. I highly encourage those two films, Yojimbo and Sword of Doom, if you're a fan of Japanese cinema. Now, this film utilizes color in a way that I've rarely seen before. There's a disparity in tone and a clash in tones when it comes to the color. But again, this disparity, this clash is totally appropriate for a film called Chaos, called Ron. And the way this film uses color, it uses it significantly to his advantage. I love how each son of Hidetora's has his own color, and there's this amazing epic battle in which the blood is just pure red, and it really feels almost like you're watching an oil painting come alive. And I really love the color and cinematography to this film. And in regards to Akira Kurosawa's directing, he uses a lot of wide angles in this film, and you rarely see close-ups and kind of more contemporary styles being utilized today. However, I love the way Akira Kurosawa filmed this movie, because it feels like you're watching theater, like you're watching a play, and it totally feels like the theater of Japan. And in regards to the score, the soundtrack to this film, Toru Takamitsu does an outstanding job. The music is haunting, and what's great is at times there's no music, and it totally helps lift those scenes. And when there is music, it's appropriate. And I really think that Takamitsu did an outstanding job with the score to this film. It's truly haunting at times. And I really want to talk really quick about the costumes and the makeup effects, because they are truly excellent, especially the makeup for the main character, Lord Hidetora. As he gradually descends into madness, his makeup changes, his face changes, and he just looks insane by the end of this film. And I've just never seen anything like it before. It's truly a captivating performance, and the makeup and costumes played a pivotal role in this film. And a fascinating thing about this movie is that this film came out late in Akira Kurosawa's career. By the time this film came out, he had made like nearly 50 movies. However, this is my favorite Akira Kurosawa film of all time. It's up there in my top 10 movies of all time. And yes, I do have a list. So I think that's remarkable that Akira Kurosawa, late in his career, was able to achieve this. To me, this was his kind of magnum opus, and I truly appreciate this movie. One thing that I love about this movie are all the little nuances, the foreshadowing that illustrate the chaos that is about to come. And this is illustrated at the very beginning of the film when Hidetora falls asleep in front of all of his men and sons after he went on his hunt. This clearly illustrates Hidetora's weakness, because he's showing vulnerability in front of all of his men and his sons. And right before he fell asleep, he jokingly said to his sons and men, "Do you want to eat me?" And it was a joke, but you can kind of feel that there's this dog eat dog mentality, especially among his sons. However, there is one good son, so there's three of them. There's Saburo, Jiro, and Taro. But Saburo is the good son, and when his dad falls asleep and his other sons and his men go to confer and do something else, Saburo stays behind and gives his father shade by pulling the branches off a tree and planting them in the dirt next to his dad so he can have shade. And this is more foreshadowing, because Saburo ends up being the only son that truly cares about his dad, but he is basically chastised for this. He is admonished for this, and in particular because he tells the truth to his dad, and his dad doesn't want to hear it. He looks at it as disrespect, and he basically banishes him in the same scene. So after Saburo gives his dad shade, and the men and the other sons go off, his dad has a dream. Hidetora has a dream. And in the dream, he's alone. And this created a significant amount of despair for Hidetora. And we find out here that since Hidetora was 17 years old, he has waged war for 50 years. Now he is 70. And it's at this very moment that he decides to give his kingdom to the eldest son, Taro. And this came out of the blue. And the other characters and sons clearly convey this to him as well, that it's just completely out of nowhere. And he gives the second and third castles of his kingdom to the other sons, to Jiro and Saburo. Now, Jiro and Taro flatter Hidetora. They flatter the father. But Saburo calls them out on this. He says this is nonsense, not to listen to them, that it's basically nothing but flattery. And an important scene, one of the most significant scenes and iconic scenes in this film, is when the father, Hidetora, uses the arrow metaphor. So basically, Hidetora gives each son an arrow, and he tells them to break it, and each son breaks the arrow very easily. However, after that, he gives each son 3 arrows. And one son tries to break them, being Taro. He tries to break it. He can't. Then Jiro tries to break the 3 arrows. He can't. And then initially, Saburo tries to break the 3 arrows, and he can't. And then the father says, the 3 of you together is stronger than one by themselves. And this is the metaphor. 1 arrow could be broken easily, however, 3 cannot. However, Saburo calls Hidetora out on this, and he basically takes the 3 arrows and he puts them on his knee, and he breaks them when he puts his knee into the effort, and he breaks them, and he's like, see, 3 arrows can be broken. So right away, Saburo can see that this is not going to work out, this metaphor, this plan that Hidetora has, which is basically have Taro be the leader of the kingdom, but then give the other 2 sons sections of the kingdom, the other 2 castles, but Hidetora gets to keep his name. He gets to keep the name as the ultimate authority, but in reality, it'll be Taro that's really calling the shots. And Saburo knows that this plan will not work, despite the fact that Hidetora, the father, thinks that there could be some kind of harmonious outcome out of this whole thing, out of this plan. And Saburo knows the world is ruthless, and he calls his dad a fool. And he knows the world is ruthless. Why? Because his dad is ruthless. His father is ruthless. So right away, we see that he's basically calling him out. He's saying, like, you have been a ruthless warlord for 50 years. And now all of a sudden, you think that the world is harmonious. And that's why he calls his dad a fool. And as a result of this, he is banished from his father's kingdom. And one thing that I love about this movie is how we get these shots of the clouds. And the clouds are slowly moving. And this is total foreshadowing of the storm that is about to come. Now, I'm reminded of the famous saying, you cannot simultaneously retain possession of a cake and eat it too. So I think about this when I think of the main character, Hidetora, the father, because he wants to perform this gesture, this kind gesture to his kids by splitting the kingdom in 3 almost, and at the same time he wants to be known as the ultimate authority in name, but have Taro be the real leader, and then the other castles 2 and 3 be ruled by the other 2 brothers. And again, Hidetora, he wants to be able to have his cake and eat it at the same time. And you can't do that. It's just not logical, right? It's either one or the other. Either you eat it or you don't eat it, and you keep it and appreciate it. So that saying is totally applicable when it comes to Hidetora. And again, because of this sentiment that he has, chaos emerges. And we see this right after he makes this declaration, when Hidetora gets upset because his concubines have to bow to Tero's wife. And right there we have a problem. So Tero, he basically is the ruler of this kingdom, but because Hidetora wants to retain the title, he's upset. But Tero's wife, who basically is a crazy woman, and it's not evident from the very beginning, but she becomes very manipulative and very condescending and malicious. But there's a reason. She's just not evil for the sake of evil. There's a reason why she's like this, and it is revealed later in the film. And she's vindictive to Hidetora, and in a way to the family in general. But there's a reason for this, right? Because at first it could seem that she's just being malicious just for the sake of being malicious. But there is a reason for this. And basically, Tero's wife immediately asks Tero, where is the banner? Where is the famous insignia that belongs to the one who basically has ultimate authority? Because Tero has moved into the main castle, right? But that banner is missing. And he basically tells his wife, well, the banner went with Hidetora, my father. And she's like, why is that? You are the one that rules this kingdom now. Why does he get to keep the banner? And it's because the dad, Hidetora, gets to keep the title. And you see, there's an issue here. It's like being promoted to the main manager of a store. However, you can't go around calling yourself the manager, right? So there's an issue there. And Tero's wife is basically pointing this out. And she's basically digging it into Tero's side, that splinter in his mind, as far as wanting him to agitate his father about this. And there's a scene where Hidetora comes to visit Tero and his wife. And again, this whole having your cake and eat it too mentality and it being troublesome is also illustrated in this sequence as well, because Hidetora he's furious that he has to sit beneath Tero and his wife. But it's like, well, wait a minute. Didn't you give your eldest son, the ultimate authority? But because he doesn't have the title, Hidetora is like, well, you should not be sitting above me. But Tero is going to basically try and claim the title. Now, it's important to note that a very important sequence took place before this scene. And in this scene, one of Tero's soldiers tries to kill Hidetora's jester, who is called Kayomi. Now, Kayomi, this person is like a jester. They're always making jokes, and that's their purpose, to sing songs, make jokes, and things of that nature. And basically, Kayomi was making a song about Tero. And in response to this, one of Tero's soldiers tried to kill Kayomi, but Hidetora shot this soldier, Tero's soldier, with an arrow. Now, this is a point of contention among Tero when he basically communes with his father. And then this is the sequence where Hidetora is upset that he has to sit beneath Tero. Now, ultimately, what happens in this scene is that Tero, he presents a pledge to Hidetora. And basically, this pledge says that he has to surrender total authority, including the title, to Tero. He is the one true ruler. And Hidetaro is furious about this. He's heartbroken, he's furious, and he views it as a betrayal from his son Taro. And he reluctantly signs the pledge and basically says that he never wants to see him again and that he refuses to stay in his castle. And there is a great saying that he says, that Hidetaro says, in regards to how his wife, how Taro's wife is basically picking at him as far as being vindictive, right? She's picking at her husband for not retaining the title, and she's trying to get him to maneuver to her desire, right? And he says, the hen picks the cock and the cock becomes a crow. And I love that. I love it when he says that about the wife. And basically, after this, it's revealed why Taro's wife has such a vendetta against Hidetaro, and it's because her family was killed after she married Taro. So even though she married Taro, Hidetaro killed her family. And you wouldn't think that would happen. You would think that once she's married to Hidetaro's son, she's part of the family, and so is her family, but by extension. However, Hidetaro killed her family. And this begins to illustrate the whole theme of this movie, one of the central themes, which is that the wrongdoings of the past, you can't escape them, despite your good intentions in the now. And this is just one anecdote that's revealed to us as far as the wrongdoings that Hidetaro did. So up to this point, we've kind of empathized with him. We've kind of been like, wow, why is this guy's son so two-faced towards him? Why are the sons betraying the father? The father did this nice gesture. This is terrible. But right here, we begin to reconsider our outlook on Hidetaro. He is actually a villain, even though he's introduced to us as a protagonist. And again, this is another aspect of the film that I love. This feeling like I'm being torn apart into two directions. Do I empathize with this character or do I despise them? Now, after this scene, we have another epic sequence where through expository dialogue, it's illustrated more crimes, more heinous acts that the father performed, right? Especially to a family member. So Hidetaro, after refusing to stay at Taro's castle, goes to see his other son, Jiro. And when he encounters his daughter-in-law, who's Jiro's wife, he says that the pain in her face hurts him, that it pains him to see her sad face. And when he says that, she smiles, and she has a very kind of cute, innocent, kind of little girl smile. And when she smiles, it further pains Hidetaro. It's worse. He says that he would rather be hated than to have that smile be shown to him, or for have her smile for him, because he killed her parents. So he knows he has the guilty conscience, and he knows that he killed her parents. And here, this girl, this woman, the wife of his son, is smiling, and she bears no ill will towards him. She has no hate towards him. And that is more troubling to Hidetaro than her hating him. And it really, really just bothers him because of his guilty conscience. So I found that to be a very, very moving scene and very deep. And she even says that she has no hate towards him because she follows the Buddha, right? And she emphasizes on how the Buddha forgives. And again, Hidetaro would rather be hated, but she says that she has no hate. So that bothers Hidetaro more. So when she smiles at him, it's very disturbing to him because he knows of the terrible things that he's done, especially to her, which was kill her parents. Now, she says that she follows the Buddha and that Buddha forgives. And then Hidetora says there is no Buddha. And you can tell that this is a guy that who has seen many wars, has lived a ruthless life, has been surrounded by death, and he does not believe in a Buddha. He does not believe in a God. He does not believe in forgiveness. And it's funny because he believes that. He subscribes to this sentiment. Yet this whole travesty began because of an act of, I guess you want to say, because of a gesture out of compassion, which was to pass on his kingdom to his children. So it was a gesture of goodwill, right? But that one gesture that this warlord did after 50 years of conquest and death it's going to be his undoing. And I find that to be intriguing, right? Especially from a narrative point of view. Like it's just really, really compelling. And even though I'm about to bring up a similarity, right, to a film that's from an entirely different genre. And I'm going to talk about Scarface, the Al Pacino version, right? And the reason why I bring it up is because I feel like in both these films, you have these ruthless villains who we follow, right? We're following these villains, right? And you want to like these individuals. You want to like them because they're the main character. You kind of want to call them the protagonists, but they're not. They're not good people, right? And I bring up Scarface because throughout that entire film, he's just a ruthless guy. However, his undoing, just like Hidetora's, his undoing was an act of compassion. So all throughout Scarface, he's just being a ruthless guy. But when he is put to the test or put to the task to basically assassinate a woman and a child, he refuses. So he basically got morals all of a sudden. He chose a compassionate maneuver all of a sudden. After living a life of ruthlessness, he decides to be compassionate in this one gesture by not killing the mother and the child or the children. I can't remember if it was one kid or two of that one man that he was asked to kill, right? The target. And because he didn't kill he didn't kill anybody, and instead he killed the person that told him to kill the woman and the child, who didn't care if the woman and the child got killed long as the main target was killed. Because he did that character Scarface, that was his undoing, because there was huge ramifications for not fulfilling that assassination, right? And ultimately that was his death, right? Well, Hidetora, same thing, an act of compassion out of living a life of ruthlessness and conquest. He decides to do this compassionate gesture to his kids, and it becomes his undoing. So I just found that to be very intriguing, and that's why I bring up Scarface, because I found that sentiment in that film as well. So there is a similar theme there, and that theme is basically, despite good intentions, there is no reckoning for the wrongdoings of the past. The past sins come to haunt you, and you will pay for those sins. So after this sequence with Jiro's wife, Jiro refuses his father's soldiers into his fortress. So basically, everywhere Hidetora goes, he has 30 men who are some of the greatest warriors. They even say one of Hidetora's men is worth 1,000. Well, Jiro refuses to allow them into his castle or into his fortress. And the reason is because he has heard through his other brother Taro of the whole incident where Hidetora's jester basically made fun of him and then Hidetora killed him. So he said because of that incident that he doesn't want his father's men into his castle, and this makes Hidetora furious, right? Again, this is another example of Hidetora viewing his son as a traitor. So it's funny because he's gone through all his sons. All three of his sons he's labeled as traitors. Saburo, Jiro, and then Taro, right? They're all traitors in his eyes. Even though Saburo wasn't a real traitor. He just spoke the truth and his dad didn't hear it. So that's another thing that's very telling about this film is that the other two sons really betrayed him, but Saburo didn't betray him. He just told him the truth. So Hidetora was seeing traitors even before they really existed. And it was unfortunate that he kicked out, he basically exiled the one son that actually cared about his father. So again, because Jiro refuses his dad's men into his castle, Hidetora disowns Jiro. And after this, we especially start to see Hidetora go slowly crazy. He's starting to space out. He's starting to dwell too much in his own mind. And there's one scene where he just basically kind of just snaps. And I love this scene as far as how it exemplifies some outstanding acting. And this is when Tango, who is Saburo's right-hand man or one of Saburo's most loyal soldiers, comes back, right? He comes back to Hidetora, basically tells him that he wants to be loyal to him. And just out of nowhere, Hidetora is like, kill all the peasants. And it was just like, whoa, out of nowhere. And then Tango says to Hidetora, go to your son, go to Saburo, he's loyal to you. And he tells Hidetora that he's the one that's banished. So basically, his sons have banished him from the kingdom. So the sons have banished the father. And Hidetora's advisor doesn't trust Tango. He thinks Tango is a lowlife, a peasant, and that he can't be trusted. Instead, Hidetora's advisor wants him to go to Saburo's castle. But there's a problem there because Saburo's castle has already been taken over by Taro. So it's a real issue. Now, ultimately what happens is Hidetora ends up going to Saburo's castle, and he was tricked. Because when he goes to the castle, he and his men are surrounded by his own son's armies. And there's this epic battle, one of the most epic battles I've ever seen on film. And the way this battle is executed, it's both brutal and artistic at the same time. The way the music plays, the way it's conducted. Here is when the score to this film truly transcends into greatness. And it's beautiful. What I love mostly about this whole epic battle that unfolds here is that there's no dialogue. And once the silence is broken, it is a very important moment. And we'll get to that. So this epic battle goes down and the blood is red, and it's not your typical reddish color. It's executed in a way that almost feels like you're watching a painting moving, a painting of a battle. And I love the way that this blood and the music is juxtaposition with the kicking up of the dust from the ground and the fog. It truly gives it this dreamlike feeling. It almost feels like you're watching this nightmare unfold, but it's an artistic nightmare. It's truly a beautiful battle to behold. It's beautiful and violent at the same time. And it's totally appropriate for a film that's called Chaos, because chaos ensues and the women inside Hidetora's company, they all commit suicide because of the battle, the bloody, violent battle that's going down. And another thing that I really love about this beautiful battle is that the sun becomes obstructed by the clouds, and the sun is trying to break through, but the clouds keep obstructing it. And this is very symbolic of what's going down, because Hidetora, to me, that sun kind of represents Hidetora, like his hope. He had this hope for the future, right? But despite the wrongdoings that he's done in his past, those clouds are blocking him from that. They're blocking him from redemption because of the sins that he's committed in his past. And another important detail that I took note of when watching this film is just how the guns, the technological advancements, Hidetora's men are no match for his son's guns. And I thought that this was very, very important to take note of. Now, Hidetora, while this is all going down, all this violence and all this chaos ensues, Hidetora just sits there, lost in thought, being driven to this madness. It's almost like this disbelief that he's been betrayed by his own family, his own children, and he can't believe it. And he's just stuck in his own head as everything he's ever loved just falls apart around him. His sons betray him. The women in his company die. All his men die. The castle's on fire. Arrows are flying around him, barely missing him. Fire is almost about to engulf him. And he just sits there, going insane. And it's one of the most powerful images I've ever seen in film. And like I said earlier, while all this is going down, there is no sound. There's no dialogue. There's no sound effects. All that's going on is just classical music. It's just the compositions from the score are playing. It's almost like you're watching a music video for a classical music song. However, once that is broken, once we hear things, we hear dialogue, we hear sound effects, what event does that? What event triggers the breaking of the silence? It is Taro being killed indirectly by his own brother Jiro. So one of Jiro's right-hand men, his soldier, kills Taro. And he says, well, hey, this is what you wanted. Now you are number one. You are the ultimate authority now. So don't worry about your brother. Everyone will just think it was an unfortunate circumstance of being in war. But Jiro knows in his heart that he killed his brother Taro. Now, that was just an amazing artistic decision by Akira Kurosawa. That breaking of the silence, just that event being such of great import. Jiro killing Taro. I thought that was such a powerful narrative decision, and I loved it. Now, ultimately, what happens to Hidetora is that he steps out of the castle. This castle's on fire, and it's such an epic shot. He's stepping out of this castle, and it's on fire, and you just see the madness on his face, the madness in his eyes. And everybody, all the soldiers, all of Jiro's soldiers, they just can't help but not kill the guy. So Jiro ultimately allows his father to wander off into the fog because he was lost in his madness. And it was almost like the image, the moment, it was so unfortunate, so sad that I feel like Jiro could not give the command to kill his father while he was in that state. Right? And again, this was just such a powerful scene that sticks within my mind after I saw this film for the first time. Now, after this, Tango and the Jester find Hidetora picking flowers out of his mind. And there's some really powerful dialogue that I love here that's spoken, especially by the Jester or the Fool. And he says, only in a mad world are the mad sane. And then Hidetora, lost in his thoughts, lost in his madness, screams out, forgive me. Because he's starting to realize that all this unfortunate stuff that's happening to him, are because of the past sins that he's committed, those brutal sins, those terrible murders that he's committed, right? And everything is finally catching up to him, and he just screams out, "Forgive me." And then the fool says, "The failed mind sees the heart's failings." And he says, "I see all those I destroyed." That's what Hidetora says. And then the fool kind of corroborates this, a phantom army. So he sees in his mind a phantom army, all those he destroyed. Again, the past is coming back to haunt Hidetora. There's no redemption for him in this film. Now, after this, Hidetora and the Tango and the Jester, the fool, they go to a house for shelter because there's a storm coming. And in this building, or in this little shack, whatever you want to call it, or in this little house, is Lady Sue's brother, Tutsumaru. And it turns out that Hidetora blinded Lady Sue's brother when he was a little boy. He gouged out his eyes. So even as Hidetora is just simply trying to find refuge in this storm, he cannot get away from his past sins. And he comes across this person who is now a grown man posing as a woman and who's blind. And he just can't escape it. He cannot escape his past sins. And here he is, taking up shelter with a person whose eyes he gouged out. And it's not even specified as to why he did it. I mean, the way it's conveyed to me is that he just did it out of pleasure. He just did it out because he's just out of brutality, out of just being an evil guy. And Tutsumaru states to Hidetora that he is not like his sister, who is, a practitioner of Buddhism and found forgiveness in her heart. He rather has hate in his heart. And he says this to Hidetora. He tells him that there's not a day that goes by in which he doesn't think about what he did to him. And again, this is just more of a cross for Hidetora to bear. It's just more of a burden. It's just more torture for him. And it's just driving him more into a state of madness. And then Hidetora even says, "All my men died when it should have been me. I should have died." And then Tutsumaru says, "I have nothing to offer you. I have no light. I have no blanket, nothing. All I can offer you is this flute. By playing this flute, it is my only pleasure. And it's the only hospital thing that I have for you." And this disturbs Hidetora because, again, it's like the only pleasure that he has in his life, because of the terrible thing he did to him, is all he has to offer Hidetora. So then again, this just drives Hidetora more into madness, has him become a greater slave to his own guilt for the past sins that he's committed. Now, while that's going down, the widow of Taro seeks out Jiro, and she wants to be Jiro's wife. Right? Because she knows that Jiro is responsible for Taro's death. And she also knows that he's pleased about it, right? That the whole plot was that he murdered him, essentially, indirectly. And man, she is such a fierce character in this film. I mean, she puts a knife to Jiro's throat, basically saying, "You will marry me, you will marry me, and I refuse to be some widow or concubine." And you see that Jiro, he is submissive to her because she is just fierce, right? And she refuses to leave her family's castle because that castle used to belong to her father. So she is a survivor, man, and she's going to do whatever she needs to do. However, in doing so, even though you kind of feel like she's vindicated because of all the wrongdoings that Hidetora did to her family, she's become twisted too, man. She's evil as well because she wants Jiro for her husband, but as a result of that, that means that Jiro's wife has to be killed. So she wants Jiro's wife killed. She wants Jiro to kill his own wife. And there's this great little metaphor in this scene. She's crying, basically saying, I don't want to be a widow. I don't want to be a concubine. I want to be the only one. And as she's crying, there's this bug that she comes across. As she's crying on the floor, and there's this bug. And then she squashes this bug. And it's very, very, very subtle, right? I mean, it's not a close-up and you see her face and she sees this bug and she's like disgusted and then she squashes it. It's almost like she's crying and she like just notices it and then she kills it and goes back to talking to Jiro. But for me, that was a total foreshadowing of how she feels about Jiro's wife. Because even before she says to Jiro, I want you to kill your wife or I want you to get rid of her because I want to be the only one, she kills this bug. And then immediately after she kills that bug, she says to Jiro, I want you to kill your wife. And to me, that bug was a metaphor for Jiro's wife. And I thought that was brilliant. And again, even though we kind of empathize with Tero's widow, she has become twisted. And she's a victim of circumstance. But now she's just doing evil things as well. Now back to Hidetora. Hidetora, he doesn't want to face Saburo, his son. The son that he initially exiled at the beginning of the film. He doesn't want to face him because he feels guilty about doing so. Because Saburo was right about how the sons cannot share this kingdom. And Hidetora doesn't want to face him. Now, Jiro's soldier, instead of killing Jiro's wife, because Jiro's not going to kill his wife himself. Instead, he's going to send his right-hand man. He's going to send his soldier to do it. But instead of bringing her head, because the widow of Tero wanted him to bring the head. She's like, bring me her head. But he doesn't bring her head. Instead, what he brings is the statue of a fox head, right? Instead of killing Jiro's wife. And he infers that she is a fox. The widow of Tero is a fox who is impersonating a woman. And how these foxes who impersonate women have basically seduced numerous kings, emperors, which resulted in those empires falling apart. So basically, he's telling Jiro, hey man, this woman is going to be your destruction. You better watch out because she has her own vendetta and she is manipulating you. So that's basically what he's trying to convey to him with this whole gesture. Now after this, there's a saying or a quote that the fool says, and I really loved it. He says, man is born crying. When he's cried enough, he dies. Now after this, Saburo's father-in-law comes to his aid by bringing an army right at the borders of Jiro's land. And Saburo also arrives as well with his army. And basically, Saburo wants Hidetora, his father, from Jiro's land. And at this point, Hidetora is just wandering around aimlessly, going insane. And Jiro's new wife continues to conspire and continues to be scandalous and continues to try to be the architect of Hidetora's family's downfall. And she basically proposes to Jiro that he actually offered to Saburo the return of his father, Hidetora, but in actuality have assassins hiding and end up assassinating Hidetora. So basically, she wants Jiro to lie to Saburo, to be like, okay, we're going to give you your father, but during the actual transaction, assassins will kill Hidetora. So she continues to be scandalous in this regard. Now at this point, Hidetora comes across the ruins of Sue's father's castle. And this further drives him into a sense of madness. And he states that he feels that he's at the lowest levels of hell. And this is all because of the guilt that he feels. And Sue and her brother is there, the blind one. And Sue, at this point, gives her brother a scroll, a Buddhist scroll, while she leaves and goes on an errand. And the brother, the blind brother, he doesn't want to be left alone, but she's adamant that she will return. And she basically asks him to confide in the Buddha, and she gives him this scroll. Now, when Hidetora sees Sue and her brother and sees that they've come across the ruins of her father's castle, he runs away. And when he runs away, he basically leaves behind Tango and the Fool, and they are not able to catch up to him. So he's on his own when he runs away. Now, Jiro, at this point in the story, really begins to make some poor, irrational, and terrible decisions, which will ultimately be his downfall. And he's basically being a fool because he's allowing his new wife to dictate his actions, and every action that he basically takes at this point moving forward is to appease her. And he's blind. He cannot see that she is manipulating him. And basically, Jiro wants to attack Saburo and risk all-out war, because at this point, it's just a standoff between Jiro and Saburo's men. Right, there is actually no engagement of battle yet. And Jiro is just very adamant about going to war, despite his advisor's warnings. And the reason why he wants to go to war, again, is because these ideas were planted in his mind by his new wife. His new wife is basically saying, if you're man enough, you'll go to war. That's what a leader does. So, against all rationality, he decides to go to war, risk all-out war, and even though his advisor warns him, and ultimately ends up kind of disowning him. And I love what he says. He says, words don't win wars. Because Jiro's like, hey, I'm a soldier. Don't be a coward. We're going to fight. Nonetheless, we're going to fight. Forget peaceful transactions and all this stuff. And he basically says to him, in warning, his advisor says, words do not win wars. Now, Saburo at this point finds his father, and when he finds him, he's just basically just hiding in this field, and he's just mindlessly looking at the sky. And when Saburo tries to bring his father out of his train of thought or his madness, his father says, don't pull me out from my grave. And ultimately, Hidetora cannot recognize his own son. He cannot recognize Saburo. And once he does, he is overwhelmed with this significant sense of shame. He feels ashamed because of how he basically rejected Saburo, because Saburo was the one that was right ultimately in the very beginning of this movie. And what happened? His father exiled him. He treated him as an outcast, and he feels ashamed. And this was a touching moment because Saburo forgives his father, right? So this is a touching moment, and it's really unfortunate because this is the real beginning of the tragedy, because you feel that maybe Hidetora will have this little bit of redemption here, this little tiny bit of redemption. And again, I love how this movie is just ripping me apart because it's making me empathize with Hidetora, despite him being a terrible person. And the reason why I empathize with him is because I never got to see the terrible acts. They're only being recounted to me through anecdotes and expository dialogue. So it kind of makes me feel like how it would be if I met an older man, right, and I befriended him, and I thought he was a good person, only to find out that this person did terrible acts. It'd be hard not to empathize with him because you do not know him as that terrible person. So, again, I want to think that Hidetora deserves this tiny bit of redemption, this exchange where his son Saburo forgives him, and we have this brief moment of harmony here. Now, Saburo's men, as they engage in battle with Jiro's men, well, Saburo's men, they basically slaughter Jiro's men because Saburo's soldiers are hiding in the woods with guns. And basically Saburo's father-in-law hanging out on the ridge, it was just a decoy. And basically because of this, because of the technological advantage of Saburo's soldiers, Jiro's soldiers get slaughtered. And I thought this is one of the few moments of poetic justice in this film, because you have to remember this technological advantage that basically Jiro had over Hidetora's men with the guns. Now he's getting a taste of his own medicine, so to speak. Saburo's father-in-law acts as a decoy on the ridge. Well, in actuality, Saburo's men are marching on Jiro's castle. So he made a grave error in acting hastily and engaging in battle with Saburo's soldiers and not thinking things through and ignoring the advice of his advisor, his right-hand man, and not being a strategist. He made a grave error, and ultimately he's going to lose everything because of this. Now, after this heartfelt moment between Saburo and his father, he is assassinated by Jiro's assassins. And it's a real tragic scene. And this is the moment where you truly realize that this is an adaptation of a Shakespeare tragedy, because this is a Shakespearean tragedy. We get to see this brief moment of harmony where Hidetora gets a tiny bit of redemption when his son forgave him, only to be robbed of that moment when his son is assassinated in front of him. And because of this, Hidetora, the father, ultimately dies of a broken heart. And it's a very sad scene. Despite Hidetora being a terrible person, you could say that he deserved this. But from us, the viewer, as far as how we know him, we never seen him do those terrible things. So, and at the end of the day, it kind of makes me ask myself, like, is it possible for somebody like that to get redemption? And it's like, I don't know, I don't know. I mean, this film is filled with a lot of conundrums and a lot of things that make you think. And maybe a person deserves forgiveness despite the wrongdoings of the past. This, no matter how terrible they were. I mean, I don't know. I mean, in practicality, in theory, you would say no, because that may be the moral thing to do. But once you engage with that individual and get to know them and get to empathize with them, it's difficult to reason on an emotional level that he deserved that person deserved that. So it's kind of like this movie kind of puts you at war with yourself, with your rational mind and your emotional self. And yeah, it's a very, very, very thought-provoking movie and emotionally provoking movie, because it really puts your emotions at war with your rationality, as I said. And ultimately what happens is, even though Saburo's dead, his soldiers, they win the war. They win the castle, but it's an empty victory. And because of this empty victory, the fool says a lot of things that people in this predicament would feel as far as the sentiments. He says things like, the gods are mischievous, the gods are cruel, they enjoy our suffering. And then I think it was Tango says, but they see us kill each other. They see that we are at war with ourselves. We can't save ourselves. Men prefer suffering. We celebrate murder, right? And it, in fact, Tango says it's the gods who weep. They're weeping. You think that it's us that are weeping, that the gods are making fun of us. or enjoying our misery, but they are the ones that are weeping. And the thought that soldiers celebrate murder and things like that, I mean, it makes you think twice about this empty victory and why it's empty, right? So at this point, Sue's head has been cut off. So Sue has been killed at the request of Jiro's wife, right? And because of this, she finally is able to achieve her goal, because she basically ruined the house of Ichimonji. Hidetora's house, his whole family, she brought it down because that's what she always wanted. She always wanted. That was her revenge. I don't think she actually cared about living peacefully with Jiro and being the queen or whatever. I think ultimately she just wanted to destroy that house because of what was done to her by Hidetora. Now, because of her actions, Jiro's right-hand man, he just cuts her head off. And you see the blood splatter on the wall. And ultimately what happens, Saburu's men surround Jiro, and his fate is determined. He's going to die. And even his advisor tells him, prepare for death. I'm going to go with you. So there's no escape of this. The whole bloodline is gone. Right? So Jiro's new wife won her victory. I don't think she even cared if she died. She just wanted to destroy the house of Ichimonji. And it was all planned. It was all calculated by her. And then we get this shot, this haunting shot that is very discussed among film connoisseurs as far as what the meaning is. And it's one of those things where it's like, it's totally based upon your own assessment. It's totally based upon what you believe it is. It's open to interpretation, rather. And we get this shot of Sue's brother on the edge of a cliff, and he almost falls. And then when he almost falls, he drops the Buddhist scroll that his sister gave him. And people interpret that as it's like the last hope of humanity dropped, that there is no hope, kind of a nihilistic interpretation that it's hopeless, there's no God, and things of that nature. But for me, the way I interpret it is mankind is blind, and he is barely surviving. He is on the edge of a cliff, and just one false move and humanity will be ruined forever. It will cease to exist. And he is with God. He is with the Buddha, right? But because of his blindness, because humanity cannot see, he drops the Buddha. He loses that connection with God, right? So that's the way I interpret it. Obviously, who you are, your path in life is going to impact your interpretation of that scene, but nonetheless, it's beautiful. It's a beautiful way to end the film, and it's a beautiful shot, and it's a beautiful message because it's open to interpretation, and I love that. And I absolutely think this is one of the greatest films of all time. Akira Kurosawa's Ran is why I basically love movies. It's one of the main reasons why I love films. I love cinema. I love Japanese cinema. And yes, this is one of the greatest movies of all time, and I highly recommend it if you haven't seen it. If you have, hey, thank you for listening to this in-depth analysis of Ran. I really appreciate it, and I appreciate each and every one of you people that listen to my assessments, my analysis, and this cinema thesis video. If you enjoyed the video, please like, subscribe, and share. Take care, people. And last but not least, one love.